أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن يمسسكم قرح فقد مس القوم قرح مثله فتلك الأيام نداولها بين الناس وليعلم الله الذين آمنوا ويتخذ منكم شهداء والله لا يحب الظالمين. If you have received an injury, surely the disbelieving people have already received a similar injury. And such days we cause to alternate among men, and they may be admonished, and that Allah may cause to be distinguished those who believe, and may take witnesses from among you. And Allah loves not the unjust. This is the verse which we have already started, and I have already discussed the word qarhun in its various meanings and connotations. Now I'll turn to the second word used here, which is nudawilu haban nudawilu. As I was about to mention yesterday, Dala yadulo dawlatan wadulan, and Dawala yudawilo mudawalatan, Dolam wadulatan. They are all infinitives. Dawlatan, Dolan, and Dulatan are the infinitives, and the inflection of the same word, which has three letters, Dal Alif Lam, is Dawala Yudawilo, which the infinitive from which is Mudawalatan. Now I'll turn to the meanings. Dalat Dahru Dolan, the Arabs use this to indicate that the time does not remain the same. It goes on changing. Dalatil ayyamu, when the times change, they say Dalatil ayyamu, the times have changed. Dawalallahu ayyam, this turns the intransitive to transitive. This inflection dawala yudawilu is the transitive form of the intransitive verb dala. So yudawilu means somebody else changes something, brings about changes. So dawalallahu ayyam, Allah has changed the times for people. وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ is to be understood in this concept, in this context, to mean that it is God who changes times between people and people. The word Dawla and Dula, there are two different words, ad-Dawla wa Dula. Dawla indicates a territory gained during war, and Dula indicates a profit in wealth of some sort, or gain of wealth, even by warfare. As a result of your victory, you gain some wealth. That wealth would be called Dula, and the territory gained will be called Dawla. But both have the same meaning, and that is why you see a Dawlat, a state, a country, is referred to as a Dawla. But both have the same underlying meaning of a thing which is never constant, which changes hands. Countries keep on changing hands, wealth keeps on changing hands, so there is no constancy in either of the two. That is why they are both referred to as ad-Dawla and Dula. So Dula to indicate wealth which changes hands, and Dawla to indicate territories which whose masters change. The Holy Quran has used the same word, adula, in the verse لَكَيْ لَا يَكُولَ دُولَةً بَيْنَ الْأَغْنِيَاءِ مِنْكُمْ, that when you give gifts and presents to others, see to it that you do not make it circulate among your own class of rich people. Otherwise, the money will keep on changing hands among a certain class of people who are rich. So see to it that your money goes from up downwards, and the circulation is like the injective movement of the boiling water, comes up and goes down and so on. So that is how the people who serve, who give alms for the sake of Allah, spend their money. They always make their wealth, make the poor people, the lower section of the society, share their wealth. Dula has also a negative connotation. Dula, a calamity is also referred to as dula. In fact, it also has a sense of a vicious circle. Dula is referred to that calamity which keeps coming, in which you are caught in a mess, it's difficult to get out. You're caught in a vicious circle. That sort of calamity is referred to as dula. The other word used is ilm, which has been so often used in the Holy Quran. Alima ya'lamu ilman wa alaman. Alima means somebody knew something, learned something. Ya'lamu, he would learn something, or he learned something. Alaman also is the infinitive, but mostly the infinitive used in the Holy Quran is ilman. But there is another variation of the same roots in the tri-lettered form, alima ya'lamu or alama aloma ya'lamu. I think aloma, yes, aloma ya'lamu. Similarly, faqiha is to understand the meaning of something. You know, faqih, who fully comprehends the wisdom of Allah's dictates and the law of Sharia, they are called faqihs. So that also, that three-lettered word also has two connotations: faqiha yafqahu or faqaha yafqahu. So alima ya'lamu as against aloma ya'lamu. Now this change of the second letter from ya'lam alima to aloma indicates a completely different meaning. Alima means anybody who came to learn something. Aloma means the one who excelled in knowledge. Faqiha means anybody who has the mental power to investigate and find out the underlying philosophies. Faqaha is the one who is a past master in jurisprudence, who excels every other. So these small deflections in Arabic mean a lot, and that is why it is highly essential for all Ahmadis to learn the Quran not by just reading the translations, but by directly trying to understand the Arabic words. Otherwise they would miss a huge wealth of meaning and will only be following the mind track of a person who has translated. Well, the Holy Quran is not one track journey, it is a journey with many, many paths, many possibilities revealed to, or made open for you. Now there are two words, ilm and irfan. So I better tell you also the difference between these two words here before we proceed with the detailed commentary on the verse. Ilm means knowledge. Alima means to acquire knowledge. What is the difference between this knowledge and the knowledge towards the word arifa, yarafu, refers? Many scholars have written on this, but I'll tell you in brief what the difference is, because it will help you understand other verses of the Holy Quran better than before. Ilm is something which is derived by the five senses. And as you receive the message, that message is ilm. And when you compute that message and begin to understand a message within, that course of computation within the mind is called irfan. That is one difference. And also there are other differences for which I have chosen, instead of going into the detailed discussion as other scholars have taken the matter up, I would like to demonstrate the differences to you through the help of some verses of the Holy Quran which I have chosen for this purpose. But out of so many, I'll only illustrate a few to you, because otherwise the entire time would be consumed by this exercise. The Holy Quran in Surah Al-Baqarah 33 declares, قَالُوا سُبْحَانَكَ لَا عِلْمَ لَنَا إِلَّا مَا عَلَّمْتَنَا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَلِيمُ الْحَكِيمُ. By five senses I did not mean the ears like we have, but a system through which, a device through which you could hear something from outside, the transfer of information from outside, be it verbal or visual or conceptual, all that will be covered by the word ilm. So idrak also is a very similar word to ilm, but idrak indicates the process through which ilm is acquired. So let's say, Subhanaka la ilma lana, the angel said, Holy art thou, no knowledge have we except what thou hast taught us. Surely thou art the all-knowing, the wise. The angels say that we have no personal knowledge of anything except that which you have taught us. So teaching from outside something which you did not know earlier by yourself is called acquiring of knowledge, and this process is called learning, ta'lim. Ta'allum, not ta'lim. Ta'allum means to learn something from somebody. Ta'lim means to teach somebody something. وَلَا تَلْبِسُوا الْحَقَّ. Now let's turn to another verse. هُوَ الَّذِي بَعَثَ فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَإِنْ كَانُوا مِنْ قَبْلُ لَفِي ضَلَالٍ مُبِينٍ. Through ilm, you can also learn the wisdom and underlying philosophy of a teaching. And this process will still be referred to as ilm, because it is not something you learn of yourself with your own effort. You don't delve deeper into something through your contemplations and find out the underlying truth. If somebody else teaches you the wisdom, that will also be covered by the word ilm and talim. So a good example of this is where the Holy Quran speaks of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that God first taught him, and raised him from among the illiterate people of Arabia. And then he started teaching others. Yatlu alayhim ayatihi, he recites the verses of the Qur'an or the signs of Allah to them, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, and purifies them, وَيُعَلِّمُهُمْ, here is the word ilm used. The mayor, the bab is ta'lim, allama yu'allimu ta'liman. So transfer of one person's irfan to another is also called ta'lim. For the person who got irfan, it is irfan. The one who knows the wisdom, has learned the wisdom, he has irfan. When he transfers that knowledge to others, that irfan, then it becomes ta'lim. Again, intuitive knowledge, or a knowledge which you feel. Sometimes you feel the truth, you know it is true, but apparently it is not accepted by you as such. That is also called irfan of a sort. The Holy Quran says, فَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ مَا عَرَفُوا كَفَرُوا بِهِ فَلَانَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ. When the truth came to them in the form of the Holy Prophet and the Holy Quran, they somehow knew it was true. They had that sixth sense telling them. So that intuitive knowledge has been referred to as irfan, not as ilm. Apparently, they had no ilm, but they had irfan. So sometimes ilm can be separated from irfan. That deeper inborn faith and belief in something is also referred to as irfan. الَّذِينَ آتَيْنَاهُمُ الْكِتَابَ يَعْرِفُونَهُ كَمَا يَعْرِفُونَ أَبْنَاءَهُمْ. The people of the book whom we had given book before, يَعْرِفُونَهُ كَمَا يَعْرِفُونَ أَبْنَاءَهُمْ. They recognize the book even as they recognize their own children. That is a different question to whom the word who refers, but I'm leaving that alone. Let it suffice here that if it refers to the book, that is the Holy Quran this time, it may refer to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it may ultimately refer to God, but in this case, let's stick to the one possibility of the reference to the book, the Al-Quran. In that case, it would mean that they know the book as they know their own children. Now, here is the difference between ilm and irfan. You know your children not through a direct knowledge, because nobody can swear that his wife is chaste. Nobody can swear that the child which is supposed to be his is really his. So you can't have an ilm unless rarely. So in that case, what you depend on is your irfan. You know the qualities of the child, from his style, from his bearing, from his color, complexion, and many other things. You have that deep intuitive certainty that the child belongs to you. So that is how the people of the book who were given books earlier, they knew what the book was, how it was revealed, what was the style of the book, how the truth was revealed to the earlier people, and how the people who believed in the truth were treated by their enemies. All these things have gone into a computation deep into their understanding, and that is called irfan. So they know that the book and also the Holy Prophet ﷺ are true. because they have known earlier books having been revealed and prophets having brought these messages, and they somehow know this is true. Yet they dare to deny the truth. That means that they are in for a big punishment, because their punishment, their denial is not because of lack of belief. Belief there was of some sort, but they did not want to accept that. Also, irfan means, as I have earlier said, message behind knowledge. Knowledge in this respect will become cursory and superficial and a surface concept. The message which it gives, which lurks behind, is called, to know that, get that message, is called irfan. For instance, the Holy Quran, speaking of Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, says, "Yahsabuhumul jahilu aghniya min at-ta'affuf, ta'rifuhum bisimahum, la yasaluna an-nasa ilhafa." That the ignorant man imagines these poor Muslims to be rich and without any need, because they never extend their hands to others for begging. Ta'rifuhum bisimahum, you know them by their signs. So to look at the faces of those poor, contented companions of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who, for instance, were Ashabul Kahf, etc., was just mere knowledge. Everybody knew them. Everybody could see their faces and receive a message inside. But that first message is ilm. But the computation of that message and to go deeper into the meaning behind is irfan. So the Holy Quran says, or let's say Allah says, that ignorant people, they also know, see them, they don't understand. You know them by their signs. So to learn the message behind signs is the art of irfan. Also, recognition, which is not born immediately, but it comes gradually to you. You recollect something and begin to know who it was. وَجَاءَ إِخْفَةُ يُوسُفَ فَدَخَلُوا عَلَيْهِ فَعَرَفَهُمْ وَهُمْ لَهُ مُنْكِرُونَ. Surah Yusuf, ayat verse 59. وَجَاءَ إِخْفَةُ يُوسُفَ, and then came in the brothers of Joseph, Hazrat Yusuf, فَدَخَلُوا عَلَيْهِ, they entered upon him, فَعَرَفَهُمْ وَهُمْ لَهُ مُنْكِرُونَ. Both began to see each other. That was knowledge. He knew who they were and they could not. Arafahum, he understood, he recognized them, because when he looked at their faces, the old story, what they had done with him and so on, it started gradually dawning upon him. And so that process is referred to as irfan. And they failed to recognize him, so they did not have any irfan. Another word which is used is zulm. Zalama yazlimu zulman means iza waza shay'a fi ghayri mawdihi. If somebody used something out of context, out of true application, used it where it did not belong. Zalama yazlimu zulmun wa mazlimatan. Zulm is also infinitive, and zulm and muzlimatan both are infinitives. It has also two different inflections on the an kalma, which is the middle part of the three-lettered word. Zalama yazlimu and zalima yazlamu. Zalman. Iswadda. So when you say zalima yazlamu, zalman, it means your face blackened or something blackened. Because zulmat means darkness. So in fact, the deeper meaning of this word is ignorance, total ignorance and darkness. And because of ignorance, you do stupid things, place a thing where it did not belong. And because of this inner darkness, you commit crimes. And it results into arrogance, in transgression against others, because they don't know what they're doing. They don't know the consequences. So they're working under an inner darkness, the veil of an inner darkness, which you can't see from outside, but there always is a darkness related to your act of crimes. Similarly, zulm, the shirk is called zulm by the Holy Qur'an, which is utter darkness. When you begin to worship partners beside God, imaginary partners, then it is called the ultimate of darkness. Hazrat Muslim Maud has written 5 different possible meanings, enunciated them in 5, saying, Be mahal wa be mauqa kaam karne wala, somebody who does something out of context as well as out of place. Kisi ke haq ko kam dene wala, somebody who does not pay full dues to someone. You know, when you have to give something to your the laborer who works for you and keep a portion of that for yourself, that is called zulm. हद से बढ़ जाने वाला और दूसरे की मलकियत पर दस्तराजी करने वाला, that is about the same thing. To misappropriate something, whether by giving something his dues, during the process of giving somebody his dues you misappropriate, or you misappropriate the property and belongings of others, that is also called zulm. And transgression as such is referred to as zulm. Shirk karne wala, I have already spoken of that. And zulm in general terms, to be cruel to anybody, is called zulm. Now let's turn to the verse. After having understood various meanings and connotations of the words used in this verse, In yamsaska qarhun faqad massal qawma qarhun mithlo. It means if you have received an injury, if you have been inflicted by some setback in this case, because qarhun does not mean only injury inflicted by a weapon. Qarhun can also be cover misery or psychological trauma, not only physical injury but psychological trauma. So that is why Hazrat Imam Razi has also taken this view that qarhan should not be taken too literally. It means injury in general terms, psychological as well as physical. So if you have been inflicted, so also your enemies were inflicted. Qarhum mithlo, likewise, in the same way. وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ, and these are the times which we change, alternate, which we rotate between people, among people. And وَلَيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, so that Allah may know, the literal translation would be, Allah may know those who believe, وَيَتَّخِذَ مِنْكُمْ شُهَدَاءَ, and take from among you witnesses. Wallahu la yuhibbul zalimeen, and Allah does not love the zalim, the transgressor, the usurper, and so on and so forth. Now this verse gives light to the claim that al-alan, the verse which covers the word al-alan, means a literal comparison between the losses and gains of Badr and losses and gains of Uhud, and ultimately, according to them, it would emerge that the losses on the Muslims' side were less than their gains. If you put both the battles in one pocket and compare them, the ultimate result which would emerge would be that the Muslim losses were less, combining both the losses, and Muslim gains were more, combining both the gains. So I said, no, this is not the meaning of al-alan. Al-alan is a very much loftier word with much wider implications, and speaks of a glorious victory, not of just comparison of in small numbers. So this verse also supports this view, because it says, in yamsaska qarhun faqad massal qawma qarhun mislu. If misery has inflicted you, so also they were inflicted by the similar and the same misery. So the comparison is only in infliction as such, not in the quantity and volume of infliction. Mislo means, in general terms, something that may happen to you, also something of that nature has happened to others. So the first meaning that would dawn upon you of the second part of the verse, وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ, would be not to compare the injury in its size and volume, but just the nature of the fact that inflictions keep on changing. Sometimes you are inflicted, sometimes another person is inflicted. And this is the scheme of things. This is a sunnah of Allah, which never changes. So inflictions change, but the sunnah does not. So if you have also been inflicted, why should you have any complaint? You could have complained if you had been deprived of the ultimate victory, of the outcome of conflict. Now, as we proceed further to study the outcome of Uhud, you will be surprised to learn that the outcome of Uhud itself was in favor of the Muslims, not against them. Because what might have happened did not happen. The enemy was at the verge of routing the Muslims altogether, entirely, wiping out Islam from the face of earth. And somehow, miraculously, it was deterred, which unseen hand had deterred that to happen. That is what you should concentrate upon, which has been pointed out by some honest and wise non-Muslim scholars as well. But most of them feel extremely, irritated at this. They have heartburns, they don't like what happened. They wanted it to turn up, to end up differently somehow. And you can read this behind the lines and sometimes above the lines in the writings of Montgomery Watt, in the writings of Muir, in the writing of Sale, and in the writing of so many others. It's so apparent. They're just exasperated at the fact that the victory which could have been much more glorious and final and decisive did not turn out to be. And the injuries were on both sides. Even severe injuries were inflicted on the Meccans. So, as I'll quote some of the passages from the Orientalist, then you will learn the true nature of Uhud, what it stood for. So, Antumul Alan in this sense is also applicable to Uhud. The message of Islam
turned out to be victorious and glorious. The truth of the Holy Prophet and Islam as revealed at the Battle of Uhud had never been revealed so beautifully and so pronouncedly, not even in Badr. Because as we will proceed further, then we will begin to see what was behind. That is called Irfan. And that Irfan was also experienced by the hostile Orientalists. You can see that. So the word Irfan can be demonstrated most beautifully as against the word ilm in what is to follow. وَلِيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا so that Allah may know who is the believer. What does it mean? Allah knows everything. Why should Allah let the Muslims pass through that suffering and traumatic experience just to know who the believer is? This is not the meaning of the word ilm. The word ilm also indicates certification, testing, to put somebody through trial. And in this sense, this word is understandable here, but also in another sense. Many Muslim scholars have taken up the discussion with relation to Allah's precognition. Allah knows things before they happen. So they have raised this issue and said that when Allah knew the believers even before they were born, even before the universe was created, in a sense, why should Allah say to know the believers? He already knew them. So they have offered different answers. Some of them have pointed out that you can't punish anybody and you can't reward anybody just by having a knowledge of what they might have done in a certain situation. But that is good and reasonable, but they have still missed the point. The fact is that precognition of God, the foreknowledge of God, was not responsible for the creation of an act of free will on the part of man. If we were to err in a certain situation during a certain trial, it is not because Allah knows we were to err, so we erred. Allah knows because we were to err. So there are two different things. We must put the horse before the cart, not the other way around. So anything which is in the knowledge of Allah is because that was to happen. And unless it happened, it could not have been in the knowledge of God. So Layalama here indicates that because they were to behave in a certain manner, so it was in the knowledge of Allah. Layalama means, although God knows before, but it is the knowledge of God is dependent on their behavior, which follows. So this is the only difference between man's knowledge, not the only, but a very important difference between man's knowledge and Allah's knowledge. We know the same thing which has happened anywhere after it has happened, and as the occurrence of that thing is not related to our knowledge, but our knowledge is related to occurrence of that thing. The difference is we know after it has happened, but the relationship is the same. The occurrence of something gives birth to knowledge of others. And that is exactly how Allah knows things about the future, because they were to occur. If they were not to occur, the knowledge will not be born. So although the source of knowledge occurs later on in time, because of God's quality of prejudging things, that is a different subject altogether, how He does it. But this is in relation to time, the same as our knowledge to a degree. We know a thing which has happened because it has happened. God knows a thing which would happen because it would happen. So if it were not to happen, God would not know it. That is the meaning liyalama, because this was the time when the knowledge of God was to be demonstrated to be true. The believers were to behave in a certain manner, and that is why Allah had that foreknowledge. وَيَتَّخِذَ مِنْكُمْ شُهَدَاءَ. This means, some people have taken it to mean that God wanted to have martyrs from among you. And some very vitriolic Orientalists have turned this as a subject of mockery and taunting and said, look here, that is how Prophet Muhammad ﷺ wanted to heal the wounds of his followers, by consoling them by saying, look here, this is the reason why you got a setback. If that is true, then in every battlefield God should have caused the same thing to happen to Muslims, a huge disgraceful setback, so that God would take some of the martyrs out of this situation. This is absolutely false. It has nothing to do with reality. It does not mean this at all. But because some of the earlier Muslim commentators have taken this, adopted this meaning, that understanding, so they have given excuse for the rabid antagonists to laugh at this and mock at this, while they know many of the great scholars of name and authenticity, of high degree of respect, have totally rejected it. So instead of mentioning that some people have said it, but it doesn't mean anything, they would just mention that explanation of a verse of the Holy Qur'an, which they can use against Islam and which you can use for mockery against Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah and his companions. Now I'll turn to the other part which I promised. As you examine the whole episode of Badr al-Uhud in depth, you begin to understand the glory of this event, the great importance in the history of Islam, and you come across such evidence on the truth of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah and Islam as you can't come across anywhere else in the world, even in the history of the world. And when I say that, I have a non-Muslim scholar to support my view, and I'll quote him later on. But before proceeding to reaching that point, let me first refer to some of the earlier scholars. تِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. Imam Razi says that it does not mean, and how wise he is. That is why I have a very deep respect for Imam Razi. He says it does not mean that God sometimes sides with believers and sometimes with non-believers, sometimes makes them victorious, sometimes makes the others victorious, because God is always with the believers. It does not mean at all that intentionally God does it. He says that it only means that God sometimes brings days of hardship and trial on the non-believers, and sometimes He brings the days of hardship and trial on believers so that they could be judged from their corresponding reactions to the hardship and trial. And also the world could judge them, the non-believers and the believers, from the outcome of that trial ultimately. So it's a beautiful meaning of تِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ, which Imam Razi has suggested. and they are absolutely true. But there is another meaning of the same which has only occurred to Hazrat Masih Maud and to none others. I'll turn to that later on. He says the purpose of this exercise of putting the Muslims sometimes through hardship and trial and sometimes non-believers through hardship and trial is as follows. Number one, if it is the hard days and the difficult days are always on the side of non-believers, and the Muslims never taste of hardship, then there would be no point in rewarding believers for their belief, because the matter would be, apparently become so obvious, and the truth would stand out so prominently, like seeing the sun appear during the day, that to believe will not earn any reward. So if somebody says, I have seen the sun and I bear witness to the fact that sun has risen, nobody would reward him. They would laugh at him. But if somebody detects the crescent, when people are still searching for the crescent to appear on the horizon, and somebody raises a pointing finger and says, there it is, that is the belief which is rewarded. Everybody applauds, yes, you have got it, while we could not. So the truth has the similarity to the detection or observation of crescents rather than to the observation of the sun, which is a very different phenomenon. So Hazrat Imam Razi says that is one of the reasons why some hardship, of course, is experienced by the Muslims as well. Otherwise, the faith and lack of faith will be treated, so obviously differently that nobody would have any doubt as to which side the truth lies. Another point which Imam Razi has raised is this, that alternation of misery with happiness and a sense of achievement is an essential part of the scheme of things, and they are both essential. Otherwise, if you are just happy, you have never tasted suffering, then in fact you will not be able to enjoy happiness as it stands, as it is truly. You won't know what happiness is unless you have also tasted some fruit of misery and infliction as well. So that is why during Ramadan we learn the pleasure of eating, which cannot be shared by us, by those who never fast, who never know what hunger is. So it is hunger which adds to the taste and the pleasure of eating. So that is why Hazrat Imam Razi says, Tilkal ayyamun udawiluha bain an-nas should be taken in this larger sense. The philosophy of creation as such indicates that misery must also be shared by those who are favorite of Allah. Otherwise they will not know the meaning of pleasure and Allah's bounties and favors. To enhance the pleasure of Allah's bounties, you have also to suffer some misery. Third, Hazrat Imam Razi declares, for moments, the believers also sometimes commit mistakes. And they should know that when you commit mistake, you will be punished. But the difference between the punishment meted out to the moments and the punishment meted out to the kuffar can be judged from the ultimate outcome. When the moments are punished, they are given a taste of punishment to realize the meaning of committing mistakes and sins, like it happened at the Jang-e-Uhud. That party which was entrusted with the task of defending the pass, the passage in the hills, ultimately, it was tantamount to defiance of Muhammad's instruction when they left the pass unguarded, most of them I mean, and started running towards people with the hope of sharing the booty, as some say, or just with the hope of sharing the victory with the Muslims in general terms. Whatever the intention was, it was a sin committed against the Prophet, against the God. So the resultant setback and suffering was a natural phenomenon. So the Holy Quran, according to him, according to Imam Razi, Allah wants the mu'mineen to believe that it's a scientific, realistic world they are sharing. They should not consider themselves above everybody else. If they commit mistake, they would also suffer somewhat, some consequences of that mistake. But again he says, the difference being the ultimate outcome. The believers are never annihilated and routed because of the punishment of God. It is only a small punishment to teach them lessons and to bring the best out of them. And the non-believers, when they are punished, they are destroyed and routed totally. So that is, according to Imam Razi, the three purposes of this. تِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. Hazrat Masih Maud has mentioned something which, is so fascinating. An angle from which he looks at this has never been shared by anyone before. I'm wondering where this is gone. Will you help me where you put this? To find where you... Yeah, that's it, yes. وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. Brahim Ahmadiyya, volume 4, page 5 or 7, written in the Hashya, underneath as notes, annotations. He says, और हम ये दिन लोगों में फेरते रहते हैं, यानी कभी किसी की नौबत आती है और कभी किसी की, और अनायात इलाहिया नौबत ब नौबत उम्मत मोहम्मदिया के मुख्तलिफ अफराद पर वारिद होते रहते हैं. It's a completely different angle of understanding. He says that Nudawiluha bain an-nas here, in application to the Muslims, means that during various trials, different qualities of different believers come out and stand out to be witnessed by so many, and the inner hidden qualities of the believers are given an opportunity to display themselves. So in the time of difficulty, this is an ayat ilahi, he says, it is not a punishment. That is the difference of understanding of Hazrat Masih Maud and the rest of the commentators. They say a punishment is meted out to the Muslims. Hazrat Masih Maud says that Allah has bestowed Muslims, believers, with various faculties and qualities which generally remain hidden because they do not display those qualities normally. But at the trials and great tests of will and mettle, they come out. And as such, Jang-e-Uhud brought out the very best of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah in trial, the very best of his followers in the trial. So it was not a punishment, but it was an exercise to bring out the hidden best. And that is how some non-believer Muslim scholars, non-Muslim scholars, have also seen this. Not with reference to Tilka al-Ayyam nudawiluha, of course, but with reference to what happened at Uhud, they have concluded the same thing, that the very best of the Muslims came out on that day. Let me see if I have missed anything else. I think I have generally covered everything, not everything, but largely what has been said about this. So let's leave a few others for the sake of brevity. Now I turn to Mr. Very, how he sees this. وَتِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ وَيَتَّخِذَ مِنْكُمْ شُهَدَاءَ. According to Very, we caused these days, etc., and so far as the slain were concerned, he desired to have them to be martyrs. Thus comfort is bestowed upon the faithful both for the disgrace of defeat and the loss of relatives in battle. As I have pointed out earlier, some Muslims have, Muslim scholars have taken the position that Tilka al-Ayyamu means God inflicts injury upon now some believers sometimes and sometimes non-believers, which Imam Razi has totally rejected, of course. And also they have taken the word shuhada to mean martyrs in the cause of Allah, while like Imam Razi and many other scholars have dismissed this as absolutely nonsensical. They say that shuhada means witnesses of truth. So on the day of Uhud, such witnesses emerged from among the Muslims of truth, whose witness could not be rejected. It was a glorious act of witnessing for the sake of truth through their own personal suffering. But I'll come to that later. Here, I wanted to point out how the non-Muslims, scholars who are, as I said, rabidly inimical to Islam, they take advantage of innocent observations of earlier Muslim scholars. Now, when you read all the commentary of various well-known Orientalists, you come to the conclusion that as they see Jang-e-Uhud, they're all of them unhappy. Although they use the harshest terms to declare Muslims routed, defeated, this and that, and they try to exult, but immediately you find their observations following that, which indicate that they have great heartburns, they're exasperated, they don't like what happened, they wanted something else to emerge from this, which just did not. So they go mad about why Abu Sufyan decided to return to Mecca, and they try to forward excuses on his behalf and to materialize the matter so that the hand of God cannot be seen by keen observers. And still they fail miserably in doing that. But instead of reading all the passages concerning Jang-e-Uhud by various writers, I have picked up one particular writer, Maxime Rodinson. Rodinson is the French pronunciation. He is a French writer. The English pronunciation would be Maxime Rodinson. So he Let me first introduce this author to you, because I think during the course of commentary, the various writers should also be briefly introduced, because it will give a better understanding of their background and how they treat Islam and why they do so. Mr. Maxime Rodinson, or Maxime Rodinson, was born in Paris 1915. His father was one of the founders of the Jewish workers' trade unions in Paris. He did advanced studies at the School of Living Oriental Languages and at the Sorbonne in the Semitic languages, ethnography and sociology. Lived for 7 years in the Middle East. Joined the Communist Party in 1937. And having served his purpose, or intent, whatever it was, and left in 1958 after the World War II was over. But has stayed in the Marxist left as a writer and a theoretician. Director of studies at the École Pratique des Hautes Études, School of Higher Studies at the Sorbonne, teaching ancient Semitic languages. Muhammad, the book in which he has written what I am going to quote, was published in 1961. Other books include Marxism and the Muslim World, Islam and Capitalism, and Israel and the Arabs. I want the French-speaking Ahmadis to study these books and find out such passages and point them to me, which are in which we will be interested in defending the cause of Islam one way or the other. The passage, only a few passages will be quoted. He has written a lengthy discourse on this, but I have taken only a few passages, excerpts. Some of the Muslim archers may have believed the battle already won and gone on the plain to take a share in the plunder. Now this indicates, as the writings of other scholars, that the Muslim claim that a victory had been achieved before the reversal was true. The very act of the guards at the passage of the pass, hill pass, of leaving that and running towards the battlefield indicates that the victory was not only just a victory, but a very convincing and outstanding victory. The signs of that victory will be seen later on when I quote the reasons which they present why the Abu Sufyan did not return and would not attack Medina. But here it shows that it was a victory turned into a semi-defeat by the act of non-obedience of the Muslims. So this should be very well understood. It was not an infliction from God upon the believers. It was a taste of what the fruits of disobedience, when you disobey the Holy Prophet, this is what happens. And in such times, the innocent also suffer. And another verse of the Holy Quran very clearly indicates that you should be aware of some results, some terrible days when the innocent may also suffer with the guilty. So this is a phenomenon mentioned elsewhere, and this is an example of this. Sometimes the mistake of one person brings misery and problems and difficulties for the whole community, and it happens. So let's now finish the reading of this passage. some of the Muslim archers may have believed the battle already won and gone on to the plain to take a share in the plunder. Whatever the cause, a good deal of confusion began to develop. The commander of the Meccan horse, Khalid ibn Walid, who was later to show his outstanding qualities of generalship in the service of Islam, took advantage of the situation to drive right through the Muslims' left flank with his men and fall upon the mass of the combatants from the rear, creating total panic. And here, mind you, that the Khalid, who is the hero of that victory, himself got converted to Islam and proved to be such an outstanding asset to Islam in their warfare with the enemies that his name has become a byword in the Muslim world. And his faith was so deep that he is one of those witnesses which has been mentioned in the Quran as shuhada. Potential witnesses also are covered by that. If the defeat, the so-called total routing of the Muslims, etc., and disgraceful defeat suffered by Na'uzubillah suffered by Rasulullah is so true, how the creator of that victory, the one who had won all the laurels, should have submitted himself so completely and with such deep conviction to Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's claims as prophet and the message of Islam as such. Hazrat Khalid bin Walid was himself desirous of being a shaheed. All his life he yearned to be a shaheed. Although he was a shaheed of different sort, as the Holy Quran has mentioned, and I believe he was also covered, but his deep desire to become a shaheed is manifested and displayed during his last moments on the deathbed. When he was about to die, he was extremely restless and so obviously in deep pain and misery that somebody thought that the closeness of death is causing this, and he was a very brave man. He wondered why a man of Khalid's caliber, who had dared death, to confront death in the face of it, to see it in the eyes and to defeat it, was showing such signs of weakness and misery. So he said, "What is happening? Why are you doing this?" In answer he said, "All my life as a Muslim, I was yearning to have Shahada, and I did not get it. And I am dying a death on the bed like other people do." Then he raised his shirt and said, "Find a place, an inch on my skin, where do not see the signs of wounds, the scars of wounds, all inflicted on me during my battle for the sake of Islam." So it's not cowardice. I went to all the places where I thought there was a certain death or eternal life awaiting for me, and still I could not get it. So that is Khalid, and that is his testimony, which I believe is also covered by the word shuhada. The Jang-e Uhud gave birth to shuhada of such exalted nature that their name will be written in gold, as they say, for the rest of the time. And their witness cannot be rejected and denied by even the maddest of Islam's enemies. What happened to Khalid, who had seen the weakness, who had seen the army of a claimant to prophethood routed so completely? When he had witnessed that God was not in their side, had changed sides to the Meccans, how could he had become the believer of the type that he emerged later on? But because of the time, we'll turn to that later on in the next verse, inshallah. There's so much yet to go. Let's put it in. Now the time, only about 15 minutes left for questions and answers, which I promised would always follow the second day of Dars, that is the Sunday, every week. So here I am. If you want to ask a question or two, maybe you're most welcome, but do it the proper way. Raise your hand. Of course, your hand is always raised, I know that. Rashid Sahib, you're counted already permanently among those who would like to ask a question. Right. Anyone else? Yes, please, Dr. Mujib Sahib.
Microphone has been provided to ladies, sir.
I see. The microphone has also been provided to the ladies. If they want to ask a question, they are most welcome as well. Please.
This is very briefly, it's not a question, sir. Perhaps it's a correction, maybe, if I may. That during your discourse explaining the ilm and irfan, you mentioned about the Holy Prophet ﷺ, that he knew his Sahaba very well. And in that context, perhaps you mentioned Ashabul Kahf. Perhaps you mentioned Ashabul Sufa.
Ashabul Sufa. I wanted to say Ashabul Sufa.
Yes.
And I should be corrected in the Dars. Well, this will become a part of Dars and it will be corrected. Thank you very much. I generally say that because Ashabul Kahf and Ashabul Sufa are so similar in so many ways to me that I always somehow, I don't know why, it's a trick or something of my mind, not of memory, but it sometimes happens. In one of my khutbahs also, referring to Ashabul Sufa, I kept on saying Ashabul Kahf, because Ashabul Kahf, I think, is a term which potentially is also applicable to Ashabul Sufa, as it is applicable to some companions of Hazrat Mirza Tahir Ahmad. So maybe that similarity causes this trick. All right, please.
Assalamu alaikum, Hazur. Sharif Ahmed Khwaja from North London. Hazur, there is one observation in the context of Jang-e-Uhud, which I think will not be out of place. Hazrat Mirza Bashir Ahmad Sahib Raziyallahu Ta'ala Anhu, in his book Khatamul Nabiyyin, has mentioned that although this Jang-e-Uhud was apparently confused situation, and the non-Muslim would say that that was a defeat to Muslims, but the following day, the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam led a party.
I have to come to that part.
I see. Well, all right, so in that case, I leave it for.
In the next verse, I'm going to broach on that particular chapter of Jang-e-Uhud.
Okay, I won't steal your thunder on that then. Now, coming to my inquiry, Hazur, in the context of this ilm or irfan, when you are expounding, quite rightly, we understood this, that the intuitively or the gut feeling, people believe inside something which they may not observe it, but
they may not confess or profess openly. Yes.
Openly. But applying this in a reverse situation, that can be turned into ignorance or prejudice. And if I could explain that, if the intuitive or gut feeling happen to be at variance with the empirical observation, then that is not a irfan, that is an ignorance or prejudice. Now, to give an example, Ghair-Ahmadis, particularly coming from Pakistan, when it comes to the promised Messiah, peace be on him, they straight away say, oh, he's wrong, it's wrong, na'uzubillah. That is their intuitive or gut feeling. And if one asks them that you see the empirical observation.
No, but that is where you have erred already. Let me correct you. That is not intuitive feeling. Intuitive feeling is completely different. It is a feeling born out of ignorance of the facts. They are misfed, and their computers derive conclusions based on their knowledge, which is wrong. This is not called intuition. It's a completely different phenomenon.
They call it gut feelings?
It's a disbriefing process which causes that inference which they draw. So having this corrected, please proceed with your question.
So it's not so much a question, but more a sort of inquiry. My feeling is that the intuitive feelings or the gut feelings should be substantiated by the empirical observation. If they happen to be at variance, then what one should believe in? The empirical observation or the deeply held belief?
You see, in the intuitive feeling is born as a resultant of whatever you know. So they are never at variance. The observation and the intuitive feeling are not at variance. What you see gives a message to you which goes deeper into your computation and you derive a conclusion. That is intuitive feeling. But you can't pinpoint which part of knowledge created that. So the knowledge is not at variance with your intuitive feeling. When it is at variance, then there is no intuitive feeling at all. Then that is suspicion. Then you remain suspended between this and that is not called intuitive feeling.
So am I right in saying
you are in doubt. So please do not be in doubt about the doubt and intuition. Doubt is a different phenomenon and intuition is a different phenomenon. Doubt is created by what you are illustrating to be a sort of contradiction between your apparent knowledge and your inclination to believe in something else. So that causes doubt. That process is called doubt. Thank you. Anything else? If nobody wants to have a question to ask, huh? Mr. Adho? Come on then, I said. I was about to turn to Mr. Rashid when timely I was told that you wanted to ask a question. Please come forward. Why have you not returned to Ghana so far? The life is returning to normal, the political life is getting activated again, and you're still here. Has your brother returned?
We've been having meetings.
I see. So take a good quick decision.
Yes, we've been having meetings.
Okay, all right.
I didn't have a plan, a question, Huzur, but this arose out of this question of intuition.
Yes.
We have a general saying that women are more intuitive than men. But the explanation you've given, I don't know whether we should accept that or that women are more intuitive than men.
I don't know either if they are. Maybe, yes. Good. Next, all right, Rashid Sahib, it's your turn at last. All these are questions? That pile of papers in your hand?
So there's really
questions, all of them?
There are questions, but I will ask two if you allow me, please.
Let's see about the time. Observe the watch and see if there is time for you to ask a question.
Right, so first one is the verse in the Holy Quran which you mentioned last week, Man yaghfirul zunuba illallah, verse number 136. Question is, the zunub, the sins, they are of different type. Some are shirki azim, some are gunah kabira, and there are some small sins as well. Could you kindly, I know there are a lot of classification, could you kindly just elaborate which sins are not forgivable and which are? Apparently, in the shirk al-zulm azim is not forgivable.
You see, shirk also is forgiven when true repentance is effected during one's lifetime. But it is not forgiven after one dies on shirk. They are two different things. Yaghfiru zunuba jamiya is a verse of the Holy Quran, a part of the verse of the Holy Quran indicating Allah forgives all sins. And another part, you read, Allah does not forgive shirk. If Allah does not forgive shirk, what would be the fate of all the companions of Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam who came from among an idolatrous society, who themselves were idolaters? So it should not be misread at all. When you read Allah forgives all sins, it means to the sins of a person while he is alive. If he repents in time before the death overtakes him, then all sins can be forgiven, whether it is shirk or whatever it is. If Allah so decides, and that decision would of course be related to the intentions and the inner experiences of the person who repents. We don't know, Allah knows best. But when he says, I will not forgive shirk, he means shirk of those people who die on idolatry. Again, it is possible that some idolatrous people who have not been given a chance to understand truth and to be led to the unity of God may also be forgiven. Because in the Holy Quran, Allah says that innal lazina amanu wal lazina hadu wan nasara was sabiina wal lazina ashraku. Having made this statement, including those who have committed idolatry, then the Holy Quran goes on declaring their fate hangs with Allah. He will decide on the day of resurrection what to do with them. While in other similar verses where the people who have committed idolatry have not been included, there Allah says their reward, if they are good deeds here on earth, even if they are Jews and Christians and Sabi'in, if they believe in the hereafter, if they do good deeds, they have nothing to fear. So shirk is included in the list of crimes about which the decision will be given on the day of resurrection. So that also does not contradict with that statement that shirk will not be forgiven. Because I understand here what Allah means is that some people are born in shirk, they never have the opportunity to be led to truth. So they will be decided according to their situation. We don't say they will be forgiven. We don't know who will be forgiven, who will not be. But that verse indicates that there is still a possibility of forgiveness for some people who belong to the world of idolatry in some situations, of which we do not know the detail. You understand? Now this is how I understand this, and now in the light of what I have observed, if you have still a question to ask,
that's fine.
You're most welcome.
Jazakallah. That's fine.
You have got the answer?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
thank you very much.
you.
May I ask second?
Yes, please, quickly.
Hazur, you mentioned Imam Razi, Rabia Basri. Razi. Yeah, Rabia Basri, Imam Raghib, Imam Ghazali, and Veri as well. Hazur, Imam Razi, why he does favor our Jamaat? Does he, his statements favor our Jamaat, do they? You always try to, prefer him.
It's a great compliment to Imam Razi, to his clear vision. That's right, thank you very much. I think it was an observation, not a question.
It was observation.
Huh?
Yeah, observation.
Oh, all right, thank you. All right, let's now prepare for the Zohar prayer and return here in, say, about 15 minutes. Okay. Assalamu alaikum.